This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
Hi, Emerald Moon. How are you? Health check, vibe check. Are you okay day?
Welfare check on Emerald. I've been asked that a lot last week.
That's weird.
I don't know why people keep asking me if I'm okay. I'm trying to wipe away my tears and stuff. No. I'm up and down. I think I'm okay. I've been having so many good conversations with people. I'm excited for another good conversation. I was telling you, Tom, and I will say I feel a little bit nervous because I'm like, this is what happens when you attach yourself to the Queensland Greens on the up. You gotta stick with it on the down. Well, or when things go not exactly as planned.
Actually, the vote just stayed the same, so actually it was
held our statewide vote.
Well, you don't have to be nervous. Everyone's interested in your takes. We want to hear from you. We want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, all that kind of stuff. Patron Peter got in touch, said sad face and hugs to Emerald.
Thanks,
it must
Peter.
be so disheartening to see Queenslanders choose the miserable Conservatives over optimistic progressives. Time to move state, ?
Never. I will never move state. Just as, I was just thinking, I'm like, it's like state of origin, with them when we're winning, with them when we're losing. And as I guess we'll get into, I think the story for me isn't necessarily that Queenslanders are all choosing miserable Conservatives.
You're allowed to blame the stupid voters for a little bit, and then you need to shake it off.
Tom, just between you and me and our dear listeners, there's a little bit of a someone has said to me recently, we're allowed a week of being mad and hating the voters a little bit, but then that's all we're allowed, 1 week, and then we go back to being like, no, it's not the voters' fault. It's never the voters' fault.
Never the voters' fault. It's your stupid fault.
But I'm allowed a week of walking around Brisbane, and everyone in Brisbane I've spoken to has had this same experience where you're walking around your local shops and you're like, really? You feel good? Was it you? Was it you? Yeah.
Do you know what you've done?
Yeah.
All right, a week of that. Well, by the time this goes out, that week is up. So this is the last moment of being able to do that. We'll get into the depressing stuff. I did ask you for hey, did anything funny happen? We talk about some funny shit that went down, and you came through with the goods. Tell me about the Catter No Door Knock Rock concert, please.
Yeah, I actually was writing down funny things that happened throughout the campaign. I think let's do my top 3. And my first was this. So Stephen Andrew, do you know who Stephen Andrew is?
No.
He was the One Nation member who's very not One Nation, got booted from One Nation effectively from what it sounds like because he refused to play along with James Ashby and wouldn't get all these extra materials printed by James Ashby's own printing company, etc. He defects from One Nation and then he joined the Catters. I think as at the time record, I don't think that he has held onto his seat as a Catter, but during the campaign he hosted this, the flyer that I've got here. It is KAP Stephen Andrew No Door Knock Rock Concert at the Cabra Hotel, Capricorn Highway, with Luke Geiger and Bareback. Luke Geiger, I don't know.
Who is Bareback? What is Bareback? Is Bareback a band?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, is this a performance or is this an activity? Is it one of those things really sounding like a city slicker here? Do you reckon they had the ball? I don't know. I went to look into this further and it looks like he held multiple of these quote unquote no door knock rock concerts where it was I will not fuck door knocking. Let's fucking get together and listen to rock, but also country music. But there was he didn't then actually he didn't say I hate door knocking. He didn't go into anything about it. It was just assumed that everyone's like, fuck yeah, no door knock rock.
It's more annoying to have to leave your house to go to the Canberra Hotel to listen to a rock concert than just say someone at your door, I don't want to talk to you, thank you, goodbye.
Tom, not if you've got one of these flyers because this enables you admit to for free entry. However, if you don't have a flyer, a cover charge of $25 per person applies. So people have never been more glad to receive a political flyer in their mailbox. This event was also sponsored by the Shooters Union. Love that. Proudly displayed. Just your political donors on your flyer. You got to love it.
Oh, God bless. All right, so we love that. What else has been going on? What are that weirdo in Caloundra?
Number 2, the independent candidate in Caloundra who was out on bail during the campaign for, I actually can't remember the charges, but I will tell you what happened. He was seen acting suspiciously outside a residence, and then they searched his car and they found this. Okay, it's almost too concerning to be funny. This is a list of things they say they found in his car, allegedly. Camouflage clothing, a shovel, an axe, gloves, duct tape, ropes, and a body bag.
Well,
I mean, who among us? That's just
Queensland shit. That's like regional Queensland stuff. That's just getting around gear.
We should, and for legal reasons as well, he strenuously denies the allegation. He says actually that this is like all fabricated. The police is like making up things. He said he had bin bags in his car. It wasn't body bags. It was just bin bags. He just had some shit in his car. He hadn't cleaned it out, and everyone's kicking up a stink. Apparently, he also like chased down the former premier Stephen Miles, when he rocked up to one of his booths during early voting and was trying to like harangue him, and Stephen Miles had to get whisked away because otherwise, he might end up duct taped together, arms chopped off in a bin bag. Who knows? Allegedly.
Yes. What happened with him? I assume he hasn't been elected?
No, he was not successful. So.
Oh, that's a shame. Democracy's lost. And I know you're particularly invested in Tom de Berg. Who's Tom de Berg?
So Tom Smith, he is a member for Bundaberg. In 2020, this is a Labor member. He won by 9 votes, 9-vote margin. He's squeaked through. He is not the guy's name is Tom Smith, and the personality pretty much matches. Not a lot going on. Pretty poor performer in Parliament. Pretty boring. Everyone, of course, was saying 9 votes, Tom. He's the first to go, right? Big swings against the Labor Party. Goodbye, Tom. I even said on election day, as a little joke, I said, you know what I'd like to see out of this election is Tom de Berg keeping his seat. That would just be a real fun. And he fucking did. He bucked despite all, Labor wipeout in the regions, he's one of 3, I think, Queensland regional seats where Labor held on. And he's going to come through and increase his margin a little bit more than 9 votes. I think he's maybe got a couple of hundred votes in it now. So good on you, Tom de Berg.
It almost makes it all worthwhile just for like feel-good stories like that, doesn't it?
So true. So true. Everything's fine now. Everything's good because Tom Smith is re-elected in Bundaberg.
They're no longer the Greens party. They're no longer your grandmother who's dealing with potpourri and, composting her garden and worried about the rainforest. The Greens of today are basically next door to the communists. In fact, they've absorbed a lot of the communist ethos. And so Green is really just a euphemistic term for a radical left-wing militant party that's completely at the odds with the future of Australia.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Let's do it, everyone. It's Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia, when it's going well and when it's not going so well. We cover it all. It's not an official Greens Party podcast. It's produced by Michael the Griffin. Tom Ballard here, coming to you from Gadigal country this week, joined, of course, by one Emerald Moon.
Hello. Yes, I'm on Yagara and Turrbal country. I'm in Manjin still. Haven't fled the state yet.
Any day. This is episode 150, Emerald. Look at us go.
Wow. Isn't that wild? We've been doing this for a little while. That's pretty nice.
Fair well. And I think we've just put out our 57th Patreon episode as well. So that's shitloads of content in the in the
lots
world.
Of content. Many hours of talking.
This hour is going to be dedicated to discussing and dissecting the Queensland state election results, what exactly happened, what lessons we should take from it, what it might mean for the Greens generally across the country. Is it over? Is the Greens,
it's all
Queensland
over, yeah.
Greens, is Greensland over?
Should we give up?
Spoiler alert, no. We should say, as we're recording this, a whole bunch of Victorian local election results are coming through as well. There's some good news there for some Greens, some cool Greens people getting re-elected, which is nice, but we still don't have the full picture. We might take a closer look at exactly what all that means for the party and Victorians on next week's show. Also, this time next week, and I know you don't care about this at all, Emerald,
no,
but
I was just going to say.
you must at least care the fact that the actual election in America is happening on Tuesday.
I understand.
And this time next week, we will either have President Trump-elect or Kamala Harris.
Harris. Can't wait.
Just want to acknowledge that and shout out to anyone in the States if you're experiencing that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to our patrons who support us, patreon.com/SeriousDangerAU, Jared, John, Robert, and Christopher. Thank you for getting on board. Welcome into the Serious Danger
Good Christian names.
family.
I don't know if they're all Christian names, but they all feel, just nice boys.
Just
This sounds like is this an NRL team? We've got Rob, Chris, John, and Jared. Thanks, boys.
Oh, your mates.
Sorry to be a bit presumptuous there, but
1 week at a time. They will enjoy listening to the latest Patreon ep, which this fortnight was another installment of our Inside the Greens series. We're reading Paddy Manning's Inside the Greens. We finished Chapter 6, Picking Fights, looking at the 1998 election when John Howard was re-elected. Things were pretty low for the Australian Greens.
Good prep. good prep for the election, for election night, actually.
Eerily relevant, but a fantastic episode there. If you become a patron, you get access to all the back catalogue, patreon.com/SeriousDangerAU.
Live shows as well. Quick update before we get into it. We put this on the social media, but if you missed it, sorry, Newcastle. Live show is sold out. If you were hoping to come along to that alongside the People's Blockade, the world's largest coal port by rising tide, sorry, you can't if you didn't get tickets already because it's freaking sold out. Thank you. That's really exciting. Please, even if you didn't get tickets to that, please still also come to the People's Blockade because that's a very important event. I hear they were trying to shut it down. Do we know how that went, Tom? Or is that, I think that court challenge is today. Is that right, as we're recording?
Oh, God. Oh, I hope that's not successful. That'll ruin all our plans. Well, they're not going to shut us down. We're going to do it regardless. No. Fuck you. Yeah.
Perfectly legal podcasting. Thank you very much.
Yes.
However, there is one other show that you can still go to as part of our New South Wales tour. Yes, the weekend tour, Serious Danger, on Sunday, November the 24th at 1:30. And if you weren't already keen, you weren't already interested, you weren't already excited, we have some exciting news, which is that our guest for the Sydney live show at the Vanguard will be, drumroll, Mark Humphries,
Yay!
The satire guy.
Satirist extraordinaire. He was on the 7:30 Report doing those funny little sketches for ages. He's been on the feed heaps on SBS. These days on Channel 7 doing the 6:57 p.m. news bulletin. A very funny man who knows a lot about Australian politics, and he's going to be joining us live on stage on Sunday, November 24th at the Vanguard. The show's selling really well. There's still a few tickets left. It's a little bit bigger than the Newcastle Comedy Club, a bit more capacity. Would love you to come along. All the details are at seriousdangerpod.com. If you're in Sydney, on Gadigal Country, book tickets to that. We would love to see you there, and we're excited to chat to Mark.
Today is a win of every single person who has been told to go back to where they came from.
The expert evidence establishes that is a racist trope with a long history.
The judge has ordered Pauline Hanson to delete the tweet and pay Senator Faruqi's costs, which are likely to run into the hundreds of thousands. But as for an apology, Senator Faruqi says she's not expecting anything.
All right, baby, let's bloody get into it. Okay, let's figure out. Okay, baby. What happened in Queensland with a state election last weekend? I guess I'm just interested. I'm glad you're doing sort of okay, and I'm interested to sort of delve into the details. But yes, tell us about election day and the night and what you were feeling and thinking as you were seeing the results rolled out. Because beforehand, people might know you were cautiously, sort of pessimistic, or at least you were very reserved. And it was hard to tell whether that was Emerald doing her classic thing before an election, in which you do seem to sort of reserve your expectations, or whether that was actually based on what you were seeing on the ground in the polls.
It was kind of based on like a vibe. Like, I think I was pessimistic, but I didn't quite. I definitely didn't see the results exactly as they played out coming. But I think I could feel part of it on election day, which obviously is way too late. But election day was weirdly quiet. It did not feel like other election days. A lot of people had voted early, so it also was like the vibe on the booth just wasn't as, exciting, and there weren't as many opportunities to talk to voters and everything as it normally was. But I remember on one of our biggest booths, and a booth that's normally really good for the Greens, I just had a feeling, I don't know why, but I had a feeling that people were voting for Labor. And this is like to get really, behind the, like, I work in Maiwar. Obviously this is in Maiwar, and Labor normally are no chance in Maiwar. The threat is the LNP. But I just was like, wait a second, people are voting for Labor. This is interesting. And I had that feeling, and it turns out, election night, we were right. I mean, we could see even as as the votes were coming in very early, it was like, is this just small sample size, or is this like really not what we expected? And I have to say, like, I anticipated that we could lose either Maywar or South Brisbane. I anticipated that I thought we would come very close to winning new seats, but not win them. We didn't come as close as I thought we would, and I didn't think that we would come close to losing 2 seats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was on the night, the story of Maywar was really up and down, right? There was a point where I think it was listed as an LNP gain on the ABC website, which was probably a little bit silly. But I mean, were you at the Maywar party or the state party?
We have a joint. We have an all-in party. So this is the funny thing. Like, this is the thing about the Queensland Greens, right? And maybe Greens parties across the country, I don't know. But like, there was a back room where a lot of us were watching results come in and kind of strategizing and dealing with media and everything. But there's also the party room, and you go into the party room and everyone's fucking like, yeah, even as the results are coming in, even as we're like, this isn't what we wanted. People are like keeping the vibe strong, which is just makes me love the party. And even at one point, like fucking some Labor volunteers like rocked up to our party and were just being pests and being horrible and gloating and wouldn't leave, and that's whatever. But it did make me think, like, yeah, I'm sure your party sucks. Like, your party is probably really shit and sad because you're not as fun as us. So
also, you just lost government, you assholes. What is this celebration across the board? So a great night for Labor as we lose fucking statewide government to the goddamn LNP and give them majority government in their own right. For fuck's sake.
Well, let's go the only place where we can kind of be positioned as winners tonight, because in their mind that night was a victory over the Greens. So they're like, let's go and rub that in their faces. Really cool stuff.
Really good stuff. Aren't we always told that aren't we supposed to be fighting the Tories? What happened to that?
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Anyway.
All right, now that we're recording this on Friday afternoon, so there's a chance these numbers might have moved by the time people are hearing this. But generally, at the time of recording, across the state, you've got a swing to the LNP of 5.9% and a swing against Labor of 7%. The seat totals at the moment, LNP sitting on 51, ALP 34, Greens 1, 3 for Katter, and 1 independent. So Labor were previously on 52 seats, so they'd be losing 18 seats, not including allowing for the gain of South Brisbane if that does indeed go to the Labor Party. We've seen big swings away from Labor in the regions, as we were talking about. I mean, yeah, I guess we've covered this. You were surprised. There was always a lot of talk before the election, and indeed even on the night as the results were coming in, it's like, oh, looks like it's going to be an LNP minority government and they're going to have to work with the Katter crossbench. That did not turn out to be the case, right? It is LNP easily, or maintaining a majority, because you need 48 or 47 to have a majority. 47. So that's a 4-seat buffer. Were you surprised by how well the LNP have done here?
No, I mean, it's interesting to hear that from an outside perspective, like minority government was still in play, because I think in Queensland at least, for some time it hasn't been, and it only kind of came back into play when Labor started recovering some of its vote, because initially, the LNP at one point was tracking for like a 13% statewide swing, and they ended up with 6%, maybe 7% statewide. So it certainly wasn't what was foreshadowed, but the assumption was, the LNP is going to romp at home. And then they were like, oh, maybe we could be in with a minority here, but it was, slim chance. Yeah.
Were you scandalised by Stephen Miles' concession speech of the night? I was driving back from a gig. We listened to this on the radio. I was listening to it. It was like, did this guy just lose? Because he is going pretty hard here. People thought it was outrageous. He didn't call David Crisafulli to officially concede. And he certainly gave a speech that was like, we almost died, and the fact that we didn't die is good, and this is actually a good night for the Labor Party. What do you think about that?
Tova, I haven't listened to it because I'm pretty sure at the exact time he was doing that, at our party, Max was speaking, or someone was speaking. And so I think that in the background you can see, like on the screens, Miles on all the news stations doing his little thing. But we were completely oblivious because TV's on mute, baby. Like it's just it's Greens for us. So I heard that, he was like, wasn't conceding, blah, blah, blah. But like I think I'm somewhat scandalized by from what I understand, a lot of Labor MPs being like, win for us, taking much heart or whatever it is from smashing the Greens. And it's like, babes, you lost like 20 seats and now the LNP, who were fucking horrible, are in government. And like, if they do what you say, they would be fucking criminalizing abortion at least again. But, you know, the very, very least, they're going to be cancelling essential renewables projects. They're going to be winding back progress on treaty and truth-telling for First Nations people. And they're going to be locking up more 10-year-old kids. Like, they're fucking horrible, and you're like, yay. Like,
well,
I also,
they're going to have to put up with a pretty fierce opposition of the Stephen Miles Labor Party, which is going to provide no opposition whatsoever, it seems.
No, I mean, but I get it as well, because having been trying to respond on election night, it just feels so fast, and you don't really know what is happening, and like the results were so kind of unpredicted and unpredictable in some ways that figuring out the right response so quickly, I grant, is difficult.
I guess so. I mean, he would have had a losing speech prepared, for surely.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, like maybe they were like, well, it's not losing in the way we thought it was.
Right.
So, yeah.
The Labor Party, losing by less.
Losing by less. New slogan just dropped.
All right, we'll get into the specifics of the Greens Labor stoush and indeed the Greens LNP stoush and what exactly happened to the Queensland Greens. But sort of bigger picture, I'll try and sum up the broad analysis that I've been hearing about what went down here, and let me know whether any of this is bullshit or red flags to you. But a few things going on, you know, the it's time factor, the fact that it was an older government, they've been in power for 10 years, they were asking for a fourth term, the issue of crime. Cameron Dick at least was saying that he didn't think that Labor listened to people and their concerns when it came to crime and issues, cost of living relief, and abortion. These were the sort of the main issues that were front of mind. People seem to think that Labor had the better campaign, certainly in the final weeks of the campaign, but it just simply wasn't enough to go up against that it's time factor and the fact that people wanted a fresh start, as David Christophilly likes to say. Is that a general read on how things played out? What do you think?
Yeah, people by the time that Palaszczuk resigned, people fucking hated the Labor government. I would say the mood was get them the fuck out of here. But somehow Miles did successfully position himself as a fresh start. I heard there were Labor volunteers on the booths saying, vote for change, vote Labor. Like they were positioned, even though they were in government, but they were like, well, he's the new premier. And the line was that he needed a term in his own right to do the things that he would do as premier. Totally new thing. But yes, as you say, it was just too late. And if the election was later, or they'd started this earlier and the trends continued, they potentially could have saved it. But they were starting from a position of so much dissatisfaction with government. Yes, on crime, despite the fact that actually crime stats were not the way that they were being presented by the Courier Mail and the LNP. But that was an issue that the government seemed to be failing on. They were the four issues that the LNP position was. It was crime, cost of living, housing, and health. They were like, ambulance ramping is up, hospitals are underfunded, cost of living's shit, and kids are breaking into cars. So.
Right. Well, yes, you'll have an LNP government to deal with, and you will have, it seems, a reduced number of Greens MPs to fight that in the Parliament at least. Let's start with Maiwar. Yeah. Question on everyone's lips: does Emerald still have a job?
But now, maybe I'll get fired after
this. This could be it, everyone. And it seems like Burko's going to be okay, but it was fucking rough. He experienced a 7.5% swing against him, small swing to the LNP candidate, Natasha Winters. So she's sitting on a primary of 37.8, Michael on 34%. And yes, a substantial amount of the Greens vote clearly going to the Labor Party candidate, Susan Irvine.
Irvine, yeah.
What's the deal?
Choose
what
Suze.
Is that what you were saying?
That was her, yeah. Choose Suze. Love heart.
What's your read on what happened in Maiwar?
Oh, fuck. I mean, have I been through maybe 2 or 3 election debriefs now? I've still got a few to go. I'll let you know after that. But the read is we expected that the threat was the LNP, right? Because the statewide swing, there's a structural swing towards the LNP, and that's the major threat in Maiwar. But Labor really pushed out policies that would traditionally be Greens policies. Like the 50 cent fares is the biggest one. And this is what, I mean, I'm already kind of getting into the bigger picture, but like from the exit polling that we've seen so far and from what we've seen on the ground is that there are two main reasons that people who were going to vote Greens ended up voting Labor. The first is that they liked their policies, and primarily like 50 cent fares is the biggest one that they went on. And these are like Greens policies that they adopted, right? And the second is to keep the LNP out. So like they went so hard on those two things that people who would otherwise have voted Greens were like, oh, maybe I need to vote Labor this time to keep the LNP out because they're scary and they'll recriminalize abortion or whatever they're going to do. And actually Labor's doing pretty well. And like certainly having been on the booths in Maiwar, they were way better than in previous elections at communicating those policies, like consistently going hard on it. And yeah, like it worked. Turns out like people want good things.
What do you know? Was Suze the candidate in 2020 or did she have a lot of name recognition? Are people keen for Suze?
I don't even know if she lives locally, but I would say like genuinely she did a good job. Like she's a good campaigner. She was good on the booths at like communicating that message. And I think that made a big difference for them. Okay. Yeah.
And Burko's generally considered to be a good local member though, right? Like, and he's been there for a while.
We thought so. Yeah, like, I mean, so the background for people who I guess aren't totally in Queensland politics is like Michael won on a very, very slim margin in 2017. It was like 78 votes kind of between him because this is a new electorate. And that was at that time between Labor and him, and then to bump him into second so that he took the seat by a very small margin. He got a 13 point something, like almost 14% swing in 2020. So like a really huge bump to almost people were like, oh, now it's a safe seat. Like the Greens definitely aren't losing Maiwar. But that was also because, yeah, like Labor had just done – they had been so weak on the west side of Brisbane for so long, and they weren't this time. And I think the vote reflects that.
The One Nation candidate is called Grant Spork. Did that have a lot of coverage? That feels like an important issue that people should be talking
Tom.
about.
Like I had this moment on whatever Sunday, and I was like in the office, and I went to get a little fork for my lunch, and I opened the drawer and I saw a spork in there, and I was like, oh, Grant Spork. Wonder how he's doing. Forever in our hearts.
Shout out to the spork.
Yeah.
All right. Well, very glad that he's still there. And I guess the other question is like, is there any, do people feel confident that Maiwar is definitely staying in the Greens' hands?
It seems like it. Okay. Yeah, it seems like it's not so much in doubt anymore. Okay. I don't know. Maybe something crazy will happen, but I think so. Yeah.
All right. Well, good on you, Burko. Great to see you in there because, yes, as people have been following the results, there were some moments in which, according to the ABC website, the Greens had 0 seats. So we're very much glad that's not the case and glad that you are still in gainful employment, Emerald Moon.
Thanks, Tom.
South Brisbane. Oh, boy. Okay, so this is Amy McMahon, of course, who we know and love, previous guest of the Serious Danger podcast.
Yeah.
Not looking good. The ABC is listing it as ALP likely at the time of recording. Amy had a 3% swing against her. The Labor Party also experienced a swing against her. The 7% swing has gone to the LNP candidate, Marita Parkinson. So that's Amy first on primary vote, then Labor, then Liberals third on 29% of the primary vote. There is still talk that One Nation preferences could push the LNP into the second place, which means that the Greens would be elected on Labor preferences. What's the vibe there? Should we hold out for hope? Should we just wait and see? What are people thinking?
I think as of time of recording, like it was looking like it was getting closer for us, but I think it went away from our favour like yesterday, Thursday or whatever. I think it's looking less likely. There's still a chance, but I think as of today, Friday, it was looking less hopeful.
Right. I mean, this is 83% of the vote counted, again, according to the ABC. Barbara O'Shea, the Labor candidate, leads by an estimated 4,500 votes. So I mean, that really sucks, and we're thinking of you, Amy, out there. I'm trying to get it straight in my head. I mean, people like Labor's like, look at us, we're amazing. But they had a swing against them. They've had fewer votes than last time.
Yeah.
At least in the primary vote, of course. So it's like, it's very hard to consider it like this amazing Labor victory of Labor taking on the Greens, right?
Yes. And the funny is that for the last 4 years in Parliament, Labor has taken great joy in yelling at both the LNP and the Greens that the only reason that Amy was in Parliament is on LNP preferences. So again, for folks outside Queensland or who might not know this, in 2020, the LNP made the decision to recommend that people put the Greens above Labor on their how to vote cards. This time they didn't do that. It's like that did have an impact on the vote. But now it's like instead of the Greens being elected based on preferences, Labor will win on LNP preferences, potentially if they win, right? But it's also like that just goes to show how fucking stupid the whole argument of being like, you only wanted so-and-so preferences, because it's like no one has ever won. Well, hardly anyone wins their seat without preferences.
Adam Bant often doesn't, and when he has like, a primary vote of over 50%. But anyway,
yes, or Katter MP Nick Tometto in this election, for example.
Okay.
Yep. Hingenbrook. The other thing is like 2020 was when Amy was going up against Jackie Trad, still a huge Labor heavyweight, like very high profile. This time Labor ran this candidate that they clearly did not think was going, like they were not expecting to win South Brisbane. They did not run, they didn't put in a lot of effort in South Brisbane. I think it shows in the fact that, like they still lost votes but would come through on LNP preferences. And like it's, there is still this structural swing to the LNP. The other factor that's interesting that someone mentioned to me this morning is like, could it, it would be interesting to look at demographic shifts. I'm always hesitant to like put too much stock into demographics when you're looking at election results, but the number of people that would have been forced out of South Brisbane and suburbs like West End because of gentrification, because of rent prices, and out into the suburbs since 2020 is probably not insignificant. That's kind of interesting. So I mean, I think there's a whole lot of things at play, and obviously also the Greens didn't run a strong enough campaign in South Brisbane, clearly.
Yeah, pretty brutal. I mean, this is from Jon O Strang and Nathan, who wrote a great take on his blog, a big brain dump about all his thoughts and feelings about the state election, and I thought this was sort of on point, sort of talking about how much he didn't see these results coming. Even a few days ago, I would have predicted that Amy McMahon's primary vote in South Brisbane was going to rise significantly, particularly given the benefits of incumbency and her amazing work on campaigns such as the struggle to stop the Gabba Olympics and save East Brisbane State School, a campaign we fucking won.
Yeah.
After the council election results from earlier this year, I was optimistic the Greens would hit a primary vote of 40 or 45% in South Brisbane. It really sucks to be wrong about that one.
Yes. Yeah. I heard multiple people be like, I think Amy could win on primary.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's pretty bullish, but I certainly, I expected her primary to go up significantly. I mean, she's still in first place on primary. But it is, and it is a slap in the face because she is such a fucking incredible local member. Like she never stops. She is like dawn till dusk serving the community. And so it'll be wild if a woman, I genuinely don't even know if the Labor candidate lives in the area, like never seen her do shit. And if she ends up being South Brisbane's representative, I think they will feel the loss.
All right, let's look at these other target seats. So those are the seats we held on to. Looks like we're probably going to lose one of them. There were other target seats for the Queensland Greens. We had Liam Flannery on the show talking about the seat of Miller. He's got about a 3% swing to him at time of recording here. About 3%. Labor's got a 4% swing against, a 3.7% swing to the LNP, but looks like the Labor is going to hang on to that thanks to Greens' preferences there. So Liam got a primary vote of 23.6%, which is probably way less than what they were hoping for and expecting, obviously. But yes, I don't know. Is there much else to say about Miller other than good try, y'all, and good luck to you, comrades?
Nice guy, nice try, as Abby Chatfield says. I mean, it's so like to refresh people's memory, the target seats, or like there was a long list of 10 seats, and then there was the kind of reduced list of 6 potential seats, including Main Run, South Brisbane, and then there was Cooper, McConnell, Greenslopes, and Miller. Greenslopes and Miller both have positive swings, but obviously not really even near enough to win. Like, and I don't know if it's I mean, I think there were quite a lot of resources sunk into protecting the Labor seats in Inner Brisbane. Those two, sure, Miller and Greenslopes as well, but more so Cooper and McConnell. They're the real, like, they're the ones where our vote, I think, went backwards.
Yep.
And they were the two that, from what I understand, Labor went absolutely fucking apeshit in to achieve that result. And I don't know when you want to get into that, but like, they went hard.
Sure. Yeah, well, let's go into the big. I mean, I was going to ask you about the LNP preferences and the change of that, and as you said, so
that was just in
decision,
South Brisbane.
Just in South Brisbane, okay. So, but the LNP, put the Greens last across the board.
I believe so.
Yeah,
okay, I believe so. Yeah,
so that's a factor there. And I guess we can talk about the bigger picture stuff. I guess I'm just interested in: is this a result of the Greens' own success? That is, people would say, we become an electoral threat. We push Labor to be more progressive. They adopt more progressive policies, including the policies that Greenland Greens have been talking about. They run on those policies, and then when they do, they win votes off Labor MPs and Labor candidates because they're doing more progressive stuff.
Yeah, and they have the resources of government to do it. Like, I think the reason 50-cent fares is so important is because it wasn't just a policy or a promise from Labor. They actually did it, and people could see before they went to vote the impacts of like what happens when a government does something that materially changes your life and has a material impact on you, and that they could say that we did it by raising mining royalties, another Greens policy, and that you could, go and tap on and see, fuck that. Every time I tap on and go, wow, only 50 cents. That's awesome. But the Greens we can't implement something until when we're not in government, right? So they had that, and they've just got an entire fucking party machine, a really established, well-resourced party machine. You look at like the hundreds of thousands of dollars of socials spending on ads that they did in those seats. They had union call centers were making calls into those seats. They flew in union organizers from interstate. Even throughout all early voting, they had union organizers from the outer suburbs that were bussed in to, like, especially to those two seats, Cooper and McConnell. And not only that, but it's like we're also squished in between, not to say that Labor isn't too, like they're also squished, between attacks from the Greens and the LNP, sure. But, we had on one side the LNP and Advance and groups like Queensland Jewish Collective attacking the Greens. And then we've also got Labor and the unions, like all focused on the Greens. I think we should have, we knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I think that we maybe didn't realize, or we need to find new ways to like go up against that kind of party machine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's both the cost of our success, both if Labor starts adopting more progressive policies being pushed by the Greens, but also the more successful we are, the more visibility we have, the more of a threat that the party becomes, then, surprise, surprise, people are going to turn their sights on us. And if we win enough seats, of course, then people are going to try and win those seats back off us. That is politics, unfortunately.
And like, this is what's been so frustrating, right, is because there's the media, I think, narrative that's been cemented now is, the Greens are blaming Labor for their losses and not doing any kind of reflection or introspection, which is like, it's so stripped of any nuance. And I think actually the Greens pointing out accurately that Labor, it gave up on saving government. It gave up on stopping the LNP from winning government and was like quite openly focused on just stopping the Greens in the inner city seats, and said as much. Like, there was reporting a month out in the Courier Mail that said that Labor MPs were like, quote, not motivated to stop the LNP in the regions, and they were instead focused on defending Brisbane seats from the Greens. There was Stephen Miles in The Guardian saying he would rather an LNP minority government, potentially working with the Katters, the anti-choice Katters, than to work with the Greens in minority government. He said that.
Really? He said that?
In The Guardian, straight up. Like, and even just, there was the Young Labor member text that was leaked from the Young Labor president texting all their members saying, everyone come into Brisbane to campaign this weekend because, quote, we know the Greens are fuckheads and we don't want them winning any more seats. And like, I think this is the thing that then gets me when people are like, oh, you turn around and have a whinge at Labor for targeting Green seats when all the Greens do is criticize Labor and target Labor seats. And it's like, well, you know, the first thing to point out is that they're in fucking government. So obviously we're going to criticize Labor. But I also think the thing that's completely missing from this, like from putting those on the same level, from conflating the way that the Greens treat Labor with the way that Labor treats the Greens, is that the Greens attack Labor on the basis of policies. Like we say, hey, Labor, why the fuck did you approve a new coal mine? Hey, Labor, why did you suspend the Human Rights Act so that you could lock up more 10-year-old children? Hey, Labor, why do you continue to take, you know, massive corporate donations? Because we don't think that anyone should be doing those things, and we have a policy-based opposition to that. Labor doesn't attack the Greens on the basis of any policies. I think about this flyer that they distributed in McConnell. Our candidate there is Holstein Wong, and she used to work for BHP in the coal mines, right? And they distributed this flyer, Labor, in McConnell, attacking her with all these photos of her in her BHP uniform, saying the Greens candidate for McConnell is in the pocket of big coal. She won't stand up for climate action. She won't stand up to big coal companies. And it's like, you're actually attacking us on the basis of our policies. It's all about the politics and all the Greens are fuckheads and we have to stop them. It's not because you have any ideological or principled opposition to what we're doing. And if you don't, then the argument is that, well, you should probably work with the Greens. Like if you also think that climate action is so important and you support these like social democratic reforms like free school lunches or 50-cent fares or free GP visits and all these things that Labor was rolling out, then why would you then say, I would rather an LNP minority government than work with the Greens when these are their policies and we would help you implement them?
Yeah, look, that's quite clarifying because just for the record, so in the wake of the results, we had Max going out there and speaking to the media saying things like this. Labor spent so much time and energy trying to stop the Greens in Brisbane. They abandoned the suburbs and regions and handed government to the LNP, giving up the opportunity to form a minority government with the Greens, betraying progressive voters across the state. Labor MPs are completely out of touch with progressive voters, celebrating the win of an LNP government in Queensland. If federal Labor is looking to repeat this result federally, that means picking fights with the Greens exclusively to Peter Dutton. Labor MPs are completely out of touch with progressive voters celebrating the win of an LNP government in Queensland and basically saying if you want to repeat this result federally, you're going to be handing the keys to government over to Peter Dutton. We heard similar stuff from Adam as well. And my initial response was a little bit like, come on, guys, you know, getting attacked is politics, right? Like it's pretty rich for us when we are constantly pointing out all the flaws of Labor. We're both competing for the same seats, you know, like we're literally going to be running against the same seats. So what would it look like for Labor to not do that, to just give up their seats to the Greens? It's like, of course, they're not going to do that. But I see what you're saying now, which is the emphasis of the abandonment of any kind of strategy to try and win across the state and just targeting the last resources on defeating the Greens or fighting back the Greens tide in Brisbane. That's a different kettle of fish. And they truly did. Like, I mean, like I said, because I'm in Maiwar, I don't see Labor go as feral as they did in other seats. But from what I hear, it was like just so intense. Like physically, there was one of the Labor MPs in one of those target seats physically shaking our organisers, like grabbing their shoulders and shaking them and like whispering threats in their ears. Like, no joke. There was another one where there were union organisers who were bussed into Cooper on the booths and would like chase our organisers and in trying to like get to our candidates so that they could talk over them, are like elbowing our organisers to, you know, stop them from like to get past. Like it was so intense. And even you just look at the way that they, like the kind of money and the resources that they were sinking into this. I don't know if you saw, for example, Joe Kelly's ads that he started running like a week or two out from the election. These were on Abe O'Neill, good friend of mine, posted this. And it's just Joe Kelly's head, completely green background, Green's font, saying, I'm pro-choice. And it's like, what are you really going for here? Like, what are you going for? And then didn't he vote? So he's a Labor MP, but he voted with the LNP to make it harder to get an abortion.
Yes. He is one of the, I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 Labor MPs who supported an LNP amendment. His specifically was around conscientious objections. So he voted for an LNP amendment that was around the duty on a healthcare provider to refer someone on to someone who will provide an abortion if they have a conscientious objection to doing so.
Great.
And he was like, no, we don't want that. And Stephen Miles, the Labor fucking premier, he was health minister at the time, and stood up and was like, this is a really bad amendment. This will make it harder for people to access the services that they need. It's really like, if you don't want to provide the service, that's fine. But, you know, positive referrals are a crucial part of the system. And Joe Kelly voted for it. But then he's like running these ads. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, what else should we hit? I mean, we should Jon O's piece, I would really recommend people having a read of. I mean, yeah, there's lots of thoughts there. Again, he describes it as a brain dump, but of course it's like a really interesting, thought-provoking analysis of what went down, and some really interesting stuff out there that makes you feel a whole lot better and questions this whole narrative. For example, there was one bit where Jon O talks about in Greenslopes, in the middle of Griffith, 5.9% swing against Labor, 3.1% swing to the Greens. This is the first state election since Max Chandler Mather became the federal MP for the Greenslopes area. Labor Party claims that he is costing us votes seem more like wishful thinking than anything else. There was a massive swing to the Greens in the Kuraby booth, is it? In Stretton?
Kuraby in Stretton, yeah.
Right.
I think it's Kuraby.
The Greens vote rose from 9.7% in 2020 to 41% in 2024.
Yeah.
Now, that booth is in the federal seat of Mourn, where Rima Naji is going to be running at the next federal election. So those are good signs.
Yeah.
But he also doesn't hold back, right? Like, he also talks about a few critiques. Do you want to chat about some of the points that Jon O makes about where the Queensland Greens fell short?
Like, I was, you know, sometimes I'm a little bit cautious when I see Jon O has posted a piece, but I didn't sit down and read it in detail, but I skimmed through, and my sense of it was he's like, things are still like, I think he's still figuring out what happened himself. So he's not arguing anything super strongly. He's just kind of like raising interesting points. The one thing that he does say is, you know, the narrative that obviously the conservative media and the LNP in particular, but even potentially I would say Labor figures are trying to push, is that the Greens are started to go backwards because they've gone too far and they're too radical now. Yep. And he pointed out this thing that when we had our wins in 2022, there was this article in the Courier Mail contrasting Max Chandler Mather with Jon O Strang being like, this is the new clean-cut, like centrist, you know, Greens, look at him, he's wearing a shirt. He must be, and he's white. Like, he must be a nice, sensible guy. Because, like, the media always say, oh, there's this radical wing that is failing in the Greens. And Bob Brown says the same. Bob Brown's like, it's not a new criticism to say that the Greens are too radical. Like, that's not true. Jon O also talks about the social media game. Like, this is one of the things that has come up, and particularly TikTok and Reels, where Labor occupied some airspace that, like, was not effectively used by the Greens or the LNP, and the LNP just were, like, incredibly cringe. And I think the Greens just didn't have the resources to go hard in this space. But, like, genuinely, there were people coming up on the booths saying, yeah, I want to vote for the guy that benched 105 kilos on TikTok. Like, his social media was good. And the thing is, though, now everyone's going to be like, oh, all you need to win an election is to be good on TikTok. So everyone's going to do it. So just doing that is not going to set you apart from anyone now and winning the youth vote. But it's still an interesting thing. He's like, we need more tactics than door knocking. I think, a lot of us are like, you can't just get big numbers. We knocked on 125,000 doors in this election, and mostly across those 6 target seats. Obviously, it wasn't enough. So, like, what next? He does say going after Labor may have lost some votes, but it's kind of like my read of his argument is it's kind of unclear. We don't really know if that's the case, but it's true that it's like there is a section of people out there who certainly, like, who kind of don't really distinguish between Labor and the Greens, and, like, get a little bit confused and upset when the Greens and Labor seem to be bickering among themselves, and they're like, I just want you guys to be nice to each other, please. And, like, what are you doing? And in an election where Labor successfully positioned, you know, the LNP as such bad guys, and they were so bad and so conservative that they were even anti-abortion, like, how out of place with a modern era, you know, politics, that then to be attacking Labor, who at the same time were doing good stuff like 50-cent fares. It was like, really? Like, come on, no. Labor seemed like the good guys here. And that is the brilliance. I'm ranting a lot again, but it's like, that's the brilliance of, I think, what Labor did. They had this 2-pronged strategy where in their quote unquote air game, like on socials and in the media, they were going after the LNP and they were positioning the LNP as conservative, using mostly abortion as this like signifier for them. But then on the ground, in those target seats, they were going fucking hard at the Greens. And so it could look like at the top level, where most people kind of interpret politics like it was Labor versus the LNP, whereas at the ground level it wasn't necessarily. But that's why, people thought they had to vote for Labor to keep the LNP out, and they thought that Labor was on their side and they were the alternative to the LNP.
And in a seat like Maiwar, which was previously held or was notionally blue, right? It was notionally an LNP seat. What does a campaign look like? Is Michael constantly talking about the LNP? Does he perceive the LNP as the biggest threat? Is that where most of the attacks are? Or was he talking about Labor government as well?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Michael, as a Greens MP, obviously criticises Labor, but it is that balance of then on the ground, probably we are just assuming that we're going up against the LNP. And I don't really know. Yeah, it's a weird one. It's like, well, but if we'd gone harder on Labor, I don't know if that would have worked, because this was an election where the people that were considering voting Greens and didn't end up voting Greens in the end probably didn't want to hear, Labor's shit. They just wanted to hear, how can you save me from the LNP?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a tweet from Kosamaris from Redbridge. He said, Greens need to wrap their heads around this reality. Greens voters are not Greens activists. Greens voters actually float between Labor and the Greens. They at times also choose to support other progressive minor parties. Constantly attacking Labor in an environment where conservative parties are gaining ground actually pushes progressive voters to Labor, not the Greens. And he cites the Brisbane Council elections, the New South Wales local government elections, the ACT election, and the Queensland state election as evidence that proves that. I'm not sure whether all those elections sort of hold up that theory.
But the thing is, you have to be a little bit skeptical, right? Because particularly when Labor figures are saying, the takeaway from this election has to be that the Greens are attacking Labor too much, and they should rein in people like Max Chandler-Mather in particular, who's really attacking Labor and who's blocking our housing bills and all of that. If the Greens want to stand a chance anywhere, they need to stop attacking us. And it's like, well, that would be nice for you, wouldn't it? Like, that would be really nice if we reined in like one of, the strongest kind of performers that the party has, and who is a great member and who is out there fighting, and actually I would say winning a lot of new votes. Yeah, I'm sure you'd like him to be quiet, wouldn't you?
Well, I think it's great that Labor senators and Labor figures are coming out and giving the Greens advice as to how to win elections more.
Just out of the goodness of their heart, right? Yeah. And that's why you have to be like, okay, a little bit of fucking bullshit radar. And I just don't think, I don't know if this is the thing, I don't know if it is the Greens going after Labor that is the problem. I think it's that it's the way that Labor presented themselves as the alternative to the LNP. And it's true that we didn't do a good enough job of doing that, and we didn't recognize soon enough, because the mood at the start of the campaign was everyone fucking hates Labor and are moving towards the LNP. And so we're not thinking the problem is people want to keep an LNP government out, and are we the option for that? We didn't have a good enough approach on that front.
Yeah, Jono's take was, Greens should obviously criticise Labor, should absolutely do that, should not do that. But be aware that if you're trying to convince people that have voted Labor for a long time, they can sometimes view, criticising Labor all the time as something of a personal attack. To convince progressive Labor voters to switch to Greens, they have to be confident that the Greens will stand strongly against the LNP.
Mm-hmm.
So he's sort of saying, we definitely should run strong Greens campaigns in Labor seats. But when Labor is telling people that voting Labor is the best way to keep the LNP out, and voters are also seeing Greens candidates and campaigns spend a lot of time attacking Labor, the annoying reality is that the Labor lines can take her on a ring of truth, no matter how many times you explain how preferential voting works. And I must say, I did briefly hand out how to vote cards in Maroochydore when I was on the sunny coast last week. And I had a woman who must have been in her 50s, who must have been voted in lots of elections, who came up to me and sincerely asked, was just saying, I want you guys, I like you guys, but I don't want the LNP to get in. What happens to my vote in this? I was explaining to a woman in her 50s about the concept of preferential voting. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, and this is the other problem though, right, is the argument that has been coming up a little bit over the last few years, which is how many votes like, could we potentially grow beyond the 10% that the Greens have kind of been stagnant at for, decades, really? Could we grow beyond that by moving out of the shadow of just supporting Labor? Like, maybe we lose people who are like, actually, I just wanted you to work with Labor and be nice to them, but maybe we gain some, anti-politics voters, or we gain people who are genuine swing voters between the major parties, for example, and move beyond the 10% that we've had. But I don't know. Maybe that doesn't work. It's a genuine question, but it does, like, it is interesting looking at opportunities for growth. And I think there's a delicate balance of being like, oh, this is just Greens cope to talk about the statewide vote and where our vote went up in suburban seats. Because it's like, obviously we had target seats that we didn't win. Yes, I know. And we've like probably lost one of our seats, and that's fucking bad. But it is interesting still that our statewide vote held. Like, I think it actually went backwards in 2020. It looks like it's holding across the state this time. And what you were kind of, Jon O talks about it a little bit in his article, but like, in addition to the swings in Greenslopes and Miller, there are seats like Woodridge, Stretton, Ferny Grove, Inala, these like outer suburban seats that saw good swings. Like, I think both Woodridge and Stretton are like 5%-ish, or maybe more, 5 or 6%. Ferny Grove and Inala around like 4%, something like that. And these are seats that would not be seen as, they're out of bounds for the Greens, like no shot. Safe Labor seats generally. And yet we are clearly, whether it's because of cost of living and housing pressures, like I think genuinely a lot of people being forced out of the inner city and forced into areas like this, like a lot of my friends are looking to buy homes, for example, in places like Woodridge, because they're like, well, that's maybe where I could afford to live. Like, I think a lot of people are forced out, but it's also like Labor wasn't paying attention. Labor was focused on the inner city there. And the Greens are able to connect with a new layer of people when we kind of move out of the shadow of Labor, and we really foreground our cost of living policies and aren't just an environmental party, which, the Conservatives would love us to go back to, and I think Labor would as well.
Another thought that Jon O had in his piece that I thought was interesting was on the question of youth crime, and was suggesting that potentially Queensland Greens somewhat vacated the debate when it comes to youth crime. Some people don't want to dignify the kind of hate campaign that the LNP was running. Of course, we know the statistics, so like the statistics are going down, but that's obviously not some people's lived experience. That clearly was an issue that spoke to a lot of people's lives who are the victims of crime. But I suppose Jon O's saying that he didn't think necessarily Queensland Greens did the work of connecting all the other policies that the Queensland Greens were fighting for, that is better housing, education, good social democratic stuff that makes people's lives better, which means they're less likely to commit crimes, with the actual crisis that people are experiencing. What would you say about them?
This was the dilemma, and obviously this was a topic of discussion throughout the campaign, is like, according to the headlines and the polls as well, crime is a top issue for the election, but not only based on the fact that there's, you couldn't realistically say there's a youth crime crisis, but also that we didn't want to buy into that being the issue of the election, right? Especially when the solution being pursued by the major parties was lock up more children. And we had there was a webpage, for example, on Michael's website, where we laid out our plan. We did develop one in the campaign committee, what our initiative or our kind of our policy, our platform around reducing crime would be in terms of early intervention and prevention, and yes, pulling in all of our policies that would reduce disadvantage and increase, housing security and engagement with school, all of these things that are a factor in youth offending in particular. And we had that available for people to use in response, but we made the decision not to proactively pursue it as an issue for us. And but I still don't know, like, it's a genuine question for me whether that would have helped, because I think about, like, we had a similar question on our hands about abortion, right? Where we were like, why, like, I don't think it's really that helpful to make the election about abortion, but it became such a big issue that we felt like we had to respond on it. And ultimately, I think that falling into that trap, like the trap that Labor set, and talking more about abortion and having materials that we handed out on the booths about abortion did not help us. And all people heard was like, abortion is an issue, and they knew that Labor was the party that was going to protect reproductive rights, and the LNP was going to reverse it, and so they voted Labor. Like, I don't think that helped us. And like the flow of a vote is not the same potentially on crime, but I just, it's hard to know whether message discipline is more important than kind of responding to the media narrative. I really don't know.
And just so I'm totally clear, the only reason that abortion was sort of in the mix was because of the potential of a Katter minority government. Is it true that now that there's an LNP majority government that there isn't any particular agenda item or policy that the LNP were pursuing that will be enacted now they're in government?
Numbers-wise, I suppose so, because the idea was if the Katters were in minority and all of the LNP members also voted for it, then it could pass, because Katters would vote for it as well. And the LNP said they would allow a conscience vote, and probably enough of their MPs would support it. Right. But the whole fucking debate was Labor saying Crisafulli refuses to rule out a conscience vote, while also explicitly saying, oh, yeah, we'll also allow a conscience vote for our MPs, a bunch of whom voted against decriminalising abortion in 2018. Like,
great.
That was the most absurd part of this part of the fucking campaign. But yeah, it was I mean, the Katters are still saying, and then they walked back that they were like, we're not going to introduce a bill straight away to recriminalise abortion. We're going to do our quote unquote babies born alive bill, which they already introduced last term. I think they're going to do that anyway. It's fucked that this is now, like, they're going to keep trying to keep this alive as an issue in Queensland politics, and it'll probably catch on around the country. And I would much rather that it wasn't a fucking debate at all. But anyway.
Well, yeah, Jacinta Namatjira is talking about how we should have a federal debate about it. All right, we've got to wrap up pretty soon. Yeah. But I just going back to this idea about, the Queensland the Greens being too extreme, and this reaction from federal, particularly Labor figures, holding up these results as evidence that the entire Greens approach to everything is wrong and they need to calm down. And there was literally an article saying Labor takes solace in Greens' losses. So they're having a great time. Even as they lose government, they're having a great time. This is a good news story.
Yeah.
PM Anthony Albanese said Queensland voters had sent a message to Greens leader Adam Bandt they did not want the party to be obstructionist. Containing the Greens party shows people who elected the Greens to Parliament expected them to play a progressive role, not a blocking role. Labor Senator Murray Watt said Saturday's result showed voters in his state felt a sense of buyer's remorse about the Greens. People voted for the Greens both at state and federal level, expecting to see progressive solutions delivered, and all they've ended up getting is a bunch of blockers and extreme activists who seem increasingly out of touch with what voters in those areas think. He accused the Greens of trying to whip up anger and anxiety in the community over Palestine. And Watt said Labor had renewed hope it could unseat the Greens from the inner city seats of Griffith, Brisbane and Ryan at the next federal election. He also said they've got a lot of feedback that everyone was very annoyed that Max Chandler-Mather spoke at that CFMEU rally, which I will take with a very big
hearing
grain
a lot,
of
have you? Yeah, many people are saying.
Hearing more and more. So a few things here. First of all, it's like, well, the state Green MPs couldn't block the agenda because there were 2 seats in the House, so that doesn't make any sense. As we've said, these results doesn't tell that story at all, particularly in certain booths in which Max Chandler-Mather was your local member. And of course, this is exactly what the message you'll be getting from federal Labor MPs that the Greens aren't signing up completely to Labor's agenda and are pushing for more progressive, actually are playing a progressive role by actually trying to push Labor agenda a little bit further. So I think we can deal with all that pretty easily. How much was Palestine and Gaza an issue in the state election campaign? Did it actually come up that much?
Not a lot, no, but we had the Queensland Jewish Collective stuff rumbling away, and like particularly, that was the thing in Maywa. They had those billboards that they were running. They put materials and socials ads out, but it is interesting. It makes me think that it's like, and I think I maybe said this when we were talking about our about Advance, and like, is the strategy about influencing the Greens to change our strategy? Because in Maywa, apparently on election day, Queensland Jewish Collective sent, it seems like, all the volunteers that they could rally. So they had maybe like 20 volunteers. They sent 10 to one booth and 10 to another. But they weren't the booths that had the greatest number of voters. They were small booths where they knew that the Greens would have a smaller presence. and that they would be overwhelming us and demoralizing the Greens volunteers. And I still that makes me think that they didn't necessarily think they could win a huge number of votes on this issue. They just really wanted to pressure the Greens to shut the fuck up about Palestine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once again, we should say whenever they say, oh, you're completely out of touch, you're an extreme view, it's like, well, look at the fucking polls, man. And actually, the federal Labor's response is overwhelmingly unpopular with the public. So actually, we're close.
And again, I think not to say that there's no one that disagrees with the Greens' position on Palestine and might have changed their vote on that. But from the feedback that I've heard and people who are on the booths, every day through early voting to election day, is that it was maybe half-half, quite a lot of people, people coming up and saying thank you for your position on Palestine, and a few people coming up and saying I'm not voting Greens because of your position on Israel, So that, but I just, the take that, this is a backlash against the Greens. I actually, and it doesn't give me great pleasure to admit this, but no, I think that it is a response to Labor running a good campaign in Queensland and adopting good policies. I think people, again, from what we've seen so far from the exit polling that I've seen, it's not finished, but the early results is people voted for Labor. They voted against the LNP, against conservatism, and for a Labor that because they liked the policies that they were proposing, which was social democratic, positive, progressive, Greens policies.
Right. So I guess that's my other question is, okay, so if you really think this is a federal Labor MP or you're looking ahead at the federal election, what are the lessons that you're taking from the Queensland state election? Because all this feedback they're giving, it's well, you can give the Greens advice, but obviously we're not going to listen to you because you're our political enemy. So it's what is your actually strategy moving forward? Is it just waiting for the Greens to continue being extreme and out of touch with opinion, or is it running negative campaign ads trying to key into what they perceive as people's dissatisfaction with their Greens MPs?
No, well, and it depends what their objective is, doesn't it? Because I think there is, they genuinely, if they decide that their target is the Greens, then they probably could copy what Labor has done in Queensland. But it could mean that they become so obsessed with that and so focused on that that they lose government for the LNP. And that's bad in case they didn't need a reminder.
Well, no, it'd be good because they will have defeated the Greens.
Yeah.
The 4 seats that we have.
Yeah.
Well, not even.
I think that maybe they're well, we just need, we'll sacrifice 1 or 2 elections of government to stop the Greens now, nip it in the bud, and then the Greens will be done. But I'm nah, fuck you. We're not, it's not going to be that easy. You can play, I've been thinking about, play whack-a-mole with the Greens. Go on, we'll pop up in fucking Woodridge because we're not going to give up that easily because, again, for Labor, this is about politics and about stopping the Greens because they're, quote, fuckheads. For us, it's about, the end of the fucking world and people sleeping in cars and tents, genuinely.
Yes, Queen. All right, very quickly, last few questions about sort of where to from here. So the leadership of the Labor Party gets automatically spilled, but people are saying Stephen Miles' speech on election night was very much his pitch to be I saved the furniture or whatever, stick with me and everything's going to be great, check out my hot guns. Do you have any read on that? And
I think he's staying. Yeah. I think he's staying.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't win. He'd hang on to against a challenge from Mr. Dick?
I reckon.
I'm
not in the Labor Party, but I think so.
How little time or patience you have
this
for
is the section where we talk about Labor. Yep, next question.
Lots of people were pointing out that, yes, wasn't there a comment from Miles straight away that if while he is the interim leader, just would offer no opposition whatsoever to the LNP's adult crime, adult time legislation. They're basically just completely given up on that front. Is that right?
Yeah. Again, somewhat unsurprising. They did that because they've done the same on, at least I'm going to forget some, but it was breach of bail, and then it was watch houses. Actually, keeping kids in watch houses is bad, and then they were no, actually it's good. And then they were breach of bail as an offence, like technical breach of bail, like not fucking checking in with your supervisor for children. That doesn't work to stop crime. And then they were like, actually, no, we're going to do that. We're going to criminalise that again. And then they were like, detention as a last resort as a principle in the Youth Justice Act. Removing that is not going to do shit. And it's a stupid thing. And then they were like, you know what, actually, we are going to do that. And so obviously they're going to do the same with quote unquote adult crime, adult time, which is not a fucking policy, by the way. What they mean is mandatory minimum sentencing for children. Just say the words. Just say what you mean, because there's nothing in the current law. Like, to be clear, I mean, I'm sure our listeners know this, but like, to be clear, our law does not have like different criminal offences for children and adults. Once you reach the age of 10, it's the same offences. It's not like, oh, that's you did murder child version. No, like it's the same fucking penalties. All you're saying is we're going to do mandatory sentencing. So take away the discretion that judges have to look at what would be an appropriate sentence in this instance and say, no, the government decides now. Which we don't do mandatory sentencing because it fucking violates separation of powers and it's bad. But anyway, go off Labor and the LNP. We hate you.
Boy. I heard the LNPs also said they would scrap optional preferential voting in state elections. So
no, they'll scrap compulsory preferential voting, make it optional.
Sorry, they'll scrap. Yes, right. I guess they'll introduce optional preferential voting, which is what you have at the Brisbane City Council elections from memory, and that makes it harder for the Greens in the future. That's not good for us, right? Yeah,
and I think it's because Queensland used to have optional preferential voting, and then it changed to compulsory. At one point, it was going to change to compulsory at the council level, and then fuck knows why Labor chickened out. And they're going to do that, so that's good.
I also heard a lot of moaning about the pre-poll was too long, that 2 weeks of pre-poll was too long.
It was a long time.
Okay. But isn't that pretty standard, 2 weeks? Isn't 2 weeks kind of...
It used to be one, I think, and then it changed to 2 a while ago.
Right.
It's interesting. A lot of people voted early this time. It was pretty – it's rough, a lot of these voting booths as well, like literally just no shade. It's hard for volunteers to stand out there all day in the sun, but I don't know.
I think you should all fucking toughen up. I was there for an hour and a half, and then I left. It was
hard. Yeah, you were there working hard for us. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, some good news, please. I mean, so the LNP will maintain 50-cent public transport. Like they've sort of signed on that. That's a good thing.
It's pretty cool.
Anything else to look forward to in the future of Queensland?
No.
Oh, fuck.
No.
Well, we tried.
We're fucked.
Any closing thoughts? We'll get into a call of action for a moment, but I suppose, after the week that you've had, such as it is, I hope that this discussion has shed a bit of light of where we're at. It is important to hang on to the fact that the state vote did not go backwards. That is something to keep in mind. And I guess, my thoughts have been like, well, politics is fucking hard. It's really hard when you're in the Greens and you're not in a major party, obviously. We know all this. And, it is not saying that there isn't some critical self-analysis that the party will have to go through across the board. But, it sounds like everyone was working their fucking guts out, as they always do. And there are just sometimes some forces that are bigger than you. And maintaining a mass left-wing movement requires constantly updating and reassessing and new challenges, and it's just hard every fucking time, right?
Yeah, we need to level up for sure.
Sam Hibbins knows how to make history.
Congratulations.
In 2014, he became the first Victorian Green to beat a sitting Liberal MP. A decade later, he's been forced to pack his bags, kicked out of the party after the leader received a serious complaint.
They are concerning inappropriate behaviour by the member towards the staff meter over a period of time.
I've had a short, consensual relationship with a staff member from my office.
Leader Ellen Sandell received a complaint on Tuesday night. She's withheld the details in order to protect the complainant's privacy.
I'm angry. Every single person, but especially women, deserve respect and safety everywhere, and especially in their workplace.
All right, call to action. This is coming out on Sunday, but if you're looking for something to do, if you're listening to this in the morning and you're looking for something to do, the Bob Brown Foundation is holding these rally for native forests, presumably calling on governments to end native forest logging across the country. There's rallies in Adelaide, Bega, Brisbane, Canberra, Hobart, Sydney, Melbourne, the Northern Rivers, Mid-North Coast and Ulladulla, at least. That's what I can see on the website. We'll put the link in the show notes and you can have a look at where one is near you. But the other thing, just coming off like that discussion about what the LNP is going to do in government, because they have said they are going to come back to Parliament straight away. They're going to introduce their bill for mandatory minimum sentencing for children. And it's obviously going to be fucked. It's going to be grim under the LNP for children, particularly for First Nations children in Queensland and children who are living with intergenerational trauma and poverty and housing insecurity are going to be targeted in a truly horrific way. So if you would like to support those children, please donate to the Youth Advocacy Centre. They're like primarily, I think, a legal support centre, but like a legal support service for kids who are caught up in the youth justice system in Queensland. They're very good and they will need a lot of support. We'll put the link in the show notes where you can donate to them.
And if you have a job for Amy McMahon, get in touch too. She's awesome. And she needs to continue the fight in some new way. Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah. Few staff as well.
Oh, God. All right.
All her staff. Yeah.
Yes. We're thinking of you all and we love you very much. Thanks for listening to our show. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Serious danger to Australia.